Hearing no complaints and seeing a couple nods, we'll get started. Just to address one item, the board of directors of the Arroyo Seco GSA in August have already taken the position to acknowledge that we're going to continue to meet with in a remote setting. So we're going to take item 2 off the agenda entirely. Just thought I would start the meeting that way. And then ask if there was any public comment on items not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, I don't see any hands raised. I do want to note that Tim Fromm will be joining us about 1:30 or thereabouts. And he's got some, he's drafted a watershed protection policy that he shared with me, and I'll have him walk us through it, but we're going to make sure, provide some time for him to do that. And I imagine we can carve through about 20 minutes or so, just talking about the well permitting process on item number 3. So if there's any other comments, I'll just jump in. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Curtis, not to interrupt you per se, but have you done a roll call yet?
Tom, I'm so glad you're here. Keeping me honest. Appreciate that. So let's do a roll call. Okay. Member Mazza? Tell me this is where you would say aye. You're on mute.
There we go. Hi, I'm here.
Thank you very much. Member Grieva?
Here.
Member Isaacson?
Here.
Member Panziera?
Here.
Member Lerner?
Here.
Member Moitosa? And then Member Fromm. So we're missing 2.
Jerry Lord.
Member Laura?
Jerry Lord.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, that gets us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Am I missing anybody? Oh, I'm missing Member Thorpe. He's missing as well. It's been a while since we've done this, so Tom, I thank you again. Let the record show that we have got all but 3 members present. We do have a quorum, so we can continue to conduct business as a committee. As we've talked, I'm just going to pull item 2 on the agenda completely off the agenda. It's already been handled by the board of directors. So if I can, if I do this right, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Yes.
it's the Spanish Valley Basin GSA's verification template.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So a couple of introductory comments, with the governor declaring by executive order that the GSAs need to be involved in well permitting. The Spanish Valley Basin GSA went through a process earlier this year and developed this verification template. I thought it was pretty well received. There's a lot of good comments from the public. After they took action in August, I sat down and chatted with Donna Myers, the general manager, and talked about us implementing something similar in the Arroyo Seco cone management area. the Aroostook Cone Management Area Implementation Agreement silent on this particular kind of administrative activity. It kind of falls within their regulatory bailiwick. So I wanted to make sure before I brought anything like this to you and the board that I had a chance to chat with her and Les Gerard. And Donna and Les did confirm that they thought it was appropriate that the Arroyo Seco GSA had this authority to process well applications in the Arroyo Seco Cone Management Area. So with their approval, I thought I'd bring this to you guys, to our advisory committee, have a discussion about it, and ultimately bring something similar, if not this exact, well, with the modifications, of course, to the organization, to the board of directors. It's pretty straightforward. It essentially walks through, getting a well, getting a well permit, keeping most of the authority within the Monterey County regulatory framework and environmental health, provides us with a couple of checks, if you will, and a signature. And I think it's a pretty straightforward process. It would be my recommendation to the committee that we adopt something similar, or recommend that the board adopt something similar. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I thought I would bring it to you and get your input.
Curtis,
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
if I may. So I was part of a, I guess called stakeholder group that they reached out to the Slains Valley GSA, as well as Norm Group, Farm Bureau, Chris Valdez with Grower Shipper, George Fontes with the Alliance, and a couple of others. And I'm not sure, maybe Tom Versick as well, but there were a couple of others that we all took a pretty hard look at the original draft that they had put together, and felt when they came back with this that you have in front of us now, that it was much better as far as really it just kind of punts everything to the permitting agency, Monterey County, which is where it should be. And we did have a couple concerns. I'm not sure they can be addressed here, or if they can, it's just there's no clear definition of a replacement well. I think that's going to lie with Monterey County in any event. And I think that was it. But I think we all felt it was a good revision to what they had first put forth.
Well, thank you for that, Nancy. I think for the committee's, background, based upon what's in the GSP and all the findings that we've developed over time, the rest of the cone management area is about as sustainable as you can get in terms of a groundwater basin. And, I really do see this as an administrative process, and leaving the permitting element with the county as it probably should be, makes the most sense. But just in terms of our implementation of this as a GSA, whether it be a replacement well or a new well, I don't think people are just going to run out there and poke a bunch of holes in the groundwater basin. But I don't really see any substantive issues with taking this onto the board and adopting this type of process and having our role in it really as an administrative role and moving it onto the county, as Nancy had mentioned.
I have a question is when they talk about new well does not include a groundwater well to replace an existing groundwater well, provided that the replacement well is designed and constructed to not exceed the capacity of the well to be replaced and extracts groundwater from the same aquifer. So a lot of these old wells, you're gonna go down to another clay layer or something. Is that considered a different aquifer?
No, not insofar as where we are in the cone, Alan. We're all in the same ground. It's all the same groundwater basin. There's no differentiation. Maybe some areas like the pressure that would be applicable, but not for us.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, I've got one ranch with 2 wells on it that have 2 completely different water qualities. Is that the same aquifer?
I would say that it is, but I understand your point. I mean, there's going to be differences in the groundwater basin, and if you're talking especially on the east side or as you get closer to the Salinas River, there's likely to be some lenses and some changes in the groundwater basin, and you're likely to see some difference in groundwater quality depending upon depth, even if the wells are close. So, I acknowledge that, but I think it's still all pretty much the same body of water. There's no real there's no real clay lenses to separate them.
Okay, and then as far as you can't exceed the capacity of the existing well?
Yeah, we can strike that. I don't see if there's any reason why we necessarily need to hold all those provisions. That's why I said it in front of you.
Yeah, I think that should be struck. I mean, I think a guy could save water by having more water and being able to apply it at the proper times and stuff.
I'm just making a note. I think that's a good add. Just to remove the limitation. Anything else, Alan?
This is Jerry Moore. Had you finished Alan's discussion there?
Yeah, Jerry, before you jump, and Nancy actually has her hand up, so I thought just in terms of process, if you wouldn't mind letting Nancy go. Nancy?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I'm not sure I know how to take my hand down, but I'll figure it out. I just want to say to Alan, I think what they're talking about, because they got that input from the county health department, and it's where people are drilling and currently may have wells in the 180-400, want to go into the deep aquifer in the pressure area. So I believe, and that those are defined aquifers, and I believe that's what they were talking about.
Yeah, that was my guess as well, Nancy. I think though, to Alan's point, in the Arroyo Seco Cone management area, I think we can eliminate the replacement well size limitation, because it might be appropriate for somebody to drill a new well on a parcel that has several wells and go to one larger well that provides better quality and better production.
I agree.
And, I wouldn't want to limit that kind of activity. So I just made the note that we'll make that change as it goes towards the board.
So to get back to the other thing then, as far as the defined aquifer, what's to say they're not going to define an aquifer at a later date? I mean, I got that well over there that on the east side is probably some of the nastiest water in Greenfield. The one next to it doesn't get the recharge that the other one gets, and it's better water quality. I would say they're not connected. I don't.
Well, there's
the difference that and the 180-400 in the deep aquifer.
What's that? Say it again.
What's the difference between the designation of that and the 180-400 and the deep aquifer?
Well, I mean, there's some pretty recognized clay lenses that separate the pressure zone into various layers. I mean, it's not strictly a layer cake kind of setup, but there are some pretty consistent clay types and ground and geological formations that you see, and it might vary a bit, but they're pretty consistent. So we can say those make up aquifers. Here in the forebay, it's all unconsolidated. There's not really any kind of lenses. And if you're talking about a well that's further on the east side and maybe out of is it in the Arroyo Seco Cone management area?
Yeah, because it's in the footprint of Clark Colony.
Clark Colony. Okay. Well, I know there's some that are on the east side that are a little different, but to date, nobody has indicated that there's a different aquifer system in the forebay. So, there's, I don't know, 50 years worth of geology No, there's no banking on the future, don't get me wrong. But I think there's an awful lot of studies that say that it's all one body of water.
Okay.
I know that's maybe not the answer you want to hear, but that's the best one I got. Jerry, you've been patient, thank you.
No, I don't mind being patient. We haven't discussed this, but the city of Greenfield contacted me, John Elves contacted me probably better than a year ago, wanting to drill a third well just off 14th, right near the Clark Colony Canal. So as what I heard when I was first investigating down there more than 50 years ago, and I don't know if this has been confirmed, but that's kind of, I was told at that time that that's the deepest point of the aquifer coming through there. And so before we bought the property some 25 or 30 years ago, the city had drilled one well with the DeCarleys, and both Alan and Mike probably know where I'm talking about there. And they drilled another well maybe 15 or 18 years ago. And then with the city of Greenfield now plan to go to somewhere in the, Mary Lerner may correct me in this, but somewhere in the 35,000 population, and to change to, upgrade to be more entertainment or regional entertainment or whatever the current vision is. So they wanted another rather larger well. And so that would be a new well. And the city currently takes more water from the 2 wells they have than we use to irrigate our vineyards in. Now, with the super sustainability that we have there in in that area of the Arroyo Seco, it's not a concern, but I'm just I don't think it's a concern of available water. It's a concern of this whole permitting thing. So Curtis, I don't know if you or any of you know how that really, is that going to take approval? Because that's not a replacement well, that's a new well.
Yeah, Jerry, all wells going forward will be subject to some sort of process like this, new or replacement. So they'll need to go through the permitting process with the county still, and through, and as we implement this, are okay that it's not going to upset the groundwater basin. Yeah, Nancy, go ahead.
Maybe I have the wrong, I'm looking at what you sent out that says item 7D. Well, that's from them, but it's the final.
The final, yeah.
I don't see where it talks about the replacement well. Am I missing that?
It's
Okay, so
graph.
all right, so I sent out 2, I apologize. I sent out 2 emails to you guys. The first one was to give you the background. It had a draft resolution and a draft template for the authorization. Mr. Versick got in touch with me and suggested that I also include the final version. So I sent out another email. So if you pulled up the first one, note that it has been modified, and I did send you the final version. That was the one that I showed you on the screen.
And the final, I think, because the more I thought about it, I think I don't see, unless I'm looking at the wrong one, and Tom probably knows, but I don't think we included the replacement well definition because we were concerned about that and just felt it needed to go, whatever it was going to be, and that was through the health department. So am I looking at the wrong form here?
No, you're looking at the right one. I agree with you. I don't see any
Okay.
any discussion about replacement.
I
well.
thought
So-
I was losing it for a minute, so
No.
I'm just, oh, thank you.
Alan, I apologize for the confusion. I think you're probably looking at the draft version.
Yeah, so Alan, we did not, in the final, that was one of our issues, was the replacement well, and just decide whatever it is as far as the permitting with the county. And so it's not in this. And I guess the other question I have, Curtis, this is a template. How do you propose to refine it for process for the Arroyo Seco GSA? Is it something that wells within the management area are they required to go and have this sign off through the Salinas Valley GSA, or will it be with the Arroyo Seco GSA and the Salinas Valley GSA, or how are you handling that?
Well, neither of those two. The way we're going to process it, Nancy, is that the Arroyo Seco GSA will have the sole responsibility for processing the well template and the permit element in the Arroyo Seco cone management area. So we won't, I just use the Salinas Valley Basin GSA's template to show you where we were headed. I'll rewrite it for us. So it'll be just the Arroyo Seco GSA inserted into a similar role as the Salinas Valley Basin GSA within the Arroyo Seco cone management area.
Right, okay, so every place that says Salinas Valley Basin GSA, it basically is gonna be the Arroyo Seco GSA.
Yep.
And they will not, even though they're part of the 4-bay GSP, et cetera, it only has to be signed off by the Arroyo Seco GSA.
That's right.
Thank you.
So I think
No,
I read something wrong, but then I have another question. So it says A, the new well, wait a minute. The new well does not include a groundwater well to replace an existing groundwater well, provided the replacement well is designed and constructed not to exceed the capacity of gallons per minute of the well to be replaced. So a new well is not a replacement well at all. Is that all they're saying? That as long as you're not going to exceed, you don't need a permit for a new well?
Where are you reading that from, please?
The very first paragraph.
I think you're reading from the,
Wow.
No, I think I'm on the new one. The following must be completed, signed, and submitted for each well permit application for a new or altered well that is subject to the governor's executive order N722. A copy of the permit application must be attached. Permits for new or altered wells cannot be approved by the county of Monterey without this form. The new well does not include a groundwater well to replace an existing groundwater well, provided that the replacement well, A, is designed and constructed to not exceed the capacity gallons per minute of the well to be replaced, and B, extracts groundwater from the same aquifer as the well to be replaced, and C, the well to be replaced ceases to be operated upon construction of the replacement well and is destroyed within blank days.
Alan, I apologize. I think we got some confusion because the version that I have doesn't have A, B, or C in there at all.
Right, and doesn't have that sentence preceding it either, Alan.
It doesn't. Alan, here's what it says. It says, the following must be completed, signed, and submitted for each well permit application for a new or altered well that is subject to the governor's executive order N-7-22. A copy of that application must be attached. Permits for new or altered wells cannot be approved by Monterey County without this form. This verification form is not required for wells that provide less than 2 acre-feet per year of groundwater for domestic users, or that exclusively provide groundwater for a public water supply system as defined in section 116275 of the Health and Safety Code. So it's
excuse me, Curtis, I just emailed it to you, Alan.
So apologize, Alan, for the confusion.
I think maybe I mixed up two deals.
It's okay.
So while he's reading that, Curtis, this is Jerry, may I come back to my question? Because I wasn't quite clear on the answer to the clearly a new additional well.
I'm sorry, I was adding Mr. Fromm to our panel here. What was your question again, Jerry?
Well, the discussion we had about 5 to 8 minutes ago, I wasn't quite clear in the answer there. We've been talking about replacement wells. That's clearly a new well. does that fall under some jurisdiction that's a public agency or so that it's different?
Well, it's a really good observation. The process appears to be exempt, or at least this process, for a public water service well. So I don't think strictly speaking it's necessary for the city as well. Anyway.
It's what I'm not quite understanding what you're saying.
Okay, well, Jerry, it says this verification form is not required for wells that will provide less than 2 acre-feet or that will exclusively provide groundwater to a public water supply system. And I would presume that the city's well would provide water to the city.
So
right?
I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on that. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you.
John Elves we've had a number of things. We're getting appraisal on the land, and they're going to buy some land from me, and they're from my family, and so forth. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't prohibited by what we're talking about here. So thank you. Let's go ahead now. You have Tim Fromm.
No, it's good. I thought that was a good discussion. So with the modifications of changing every place where it says Salinas Valley Basin GSA to Arroyo Seco GSA, would it be the committee's? Tim, you got a question?
I do. Sorry, I came in late, but I was listening to Alan, and Alan was reading the exact thing that I've got that was sent to us yesterday that I printed. So, maybe there's a couple of versions flying around, but what Alan was reading was what was sent to us.
Yeah.
What I think I did is I printed both of those deals out, and I got them mixed up. The one Nancy sent, I found it in.
I just sent it to you as well, Tim.
Okay.
So again, I apologize to everyone. I tried to send both the draft and the final version to everyone. We've been having a discussion about the draft. The final is much cleaner, right? So apologize for that.
And Curtis, based on the discussion and confirmation that it's the final draft is verification form that I would recommend moving it forward to the board of directors with the changes. That's the Arroyo Seco GSA instead of the Salinas Valley GSA in the sections as appropriate. And that's a motion.
Anyone want to second that motion?
I'll second it. This is Mary.
Thank you, Mary. So before we take action as a committee, is there any additional public comment on the motion? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'll do my best to do a roll call. Vote then. Tammy Mesa,
Here.
is that a yes or a no?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Michael Grieva,
Yes.
Nancy Isaacson,
Yes.
Alan Panziera,
Yes.
Mary Lerner,
Yes.
Tim Fromm,
Yes.
Jerry Lohr.
Yes.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Good discussion. Motion passes. I'll work on getting that to the board of directors this month for their action. Our next item on the agenda is to talk about our Arroyo Seco River Watershed Protection Program. And Tim, how do you, I want to just tell the group, Tim did a great job putting together a draft. I haven't sent it to you, so I thought it would be better for us to talk about it here and really let him kind of lead the discussion if you're willing to do so, Tim.
I can, Curtis, thanks. Do you happen to have that document that you can put up on the screen?
Yeah, I'm working on, I'm sharing my screen right now, so stand by.
Just as background, as Curtis is working at this, there did not seem, at least Curtis was not able to find sort of a template for this type of policy. We know that we were trying to achieve the goals that we talked about a couple years ago, to ensure that the Arroyo Seco River would not be modified in a way that would reduce the sustainability of the current Arroyo Seco Greenfield Basin. And there was a couple of bullet points that we were trying to achieve, and that was no new dams, which would alter the hydrograph, and no new appropriations, which may diminish the sustainability of the watershed or of the groundwater basin. So just yesterday afternoon, I decided just to take a rough stab at it, and you know, I'm not a policy writing person, but I wrote a little preamble which I was trying to capture what we talked about, and then I was able to find a watershed protection policy from, I think, Ventura. It was for a different purpose. They were trying to protect it from activities that would increase flooding in the lower part of the watershed. But there was portions of that policy which I sort of mined and cut and pasted into this simple policy that I sent over to Curtis, figuring that it would start a conversation and get into the right hands to turn it into what the format of what a real policy is. And I can also ship it to my sort of policy people and try to limit it to see if it reflects, if there's anything similar elsewhere in the state, and if it achieves what we're trying to achieve. So that's about it. Curtis took a look at it last night and said, thanks, we can use this as sort of a framework to start a discussion. And I think that he was going to clean it up a little bit, maybe run it by folks who know what they're talking about.
So can you all see my screen? Am I showing you are you seeing the policy on?
Yes, well, not the whole thing, but the first
Right.
part of it.
It's the first part. So this is a preamble. You know what I proposed with Tim to do was that, you know, have this discussion today, and then I wanted to work with Mary on cleaning up the language and perhaps crafting this more into a policy with a resolution. So and we'll take some of this language and kind of tweak it around. The kind of the nuts and bolts are in Articles 1 and 2. They're pretty straightforward. We again we'll take a run at modifying these and kind of managing them. I'm a little reluctant to, you know, initially to name the Salinas Valley Basin GSA, as they won't really be taking action. It'll really be our GSA that will take the position on this, but you know, things like that. And then, you know, the protection on regulation of the water courses is where we really want to make sure that we get this in the right context and in the right kind of language. You know, as an organization, we'll need to think about how we would position ourselves to prevent any kind of dams being constructed on the Arroyo Seco. We'll need to have the appropriate findings that'll speak to maintaining the groundwater basin's sustainability. So we'll need to kind of beef up some of these, but it's a really great start.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed right off the get-go is the intention, for example, on new appropriations or new diversions is just that, is for the new any new anticipated stuff or proposed stuff. I don't want this to be characterized as diminishing existing use or existing diversions, because I'm looking at this like a baseline. Okay, right now, the watershed is being managed in a way that we're sustainable. And we want to ensure that we're not going to modify or overburden the watershed beyond that. So I don't want language in here to make somebody come back and look at it and they say, oh, well, this means that there'll be no diversions out of the Arroyo Seco. Well, that's not my goal. And so we have to be careful about that. And for example, when you get all the way down to the bottom, I make a statement, something like, this is not going to disrupt people's legitimate riparian rights, for example. So, that this is, we just, this type of stuff, we always have to be careful that other folks read into it things that we're not trying to add.
Tim, those are really good points. And that raises another set of issues that I think I want to run this thing by the partnership between Mary Lerner and our Clark Colony attorney as well, to get their feedback on how we craft this thing. So we want to make sure that the existing diversions and existing ways in which the rivers manage are maintained, but we want to prohibit really any dams that would impede the natural flow of water into the groundwater basin.
So Curtis,
Yeah.
if I may. So, I mean, I think it's not, just seeing this, your last point was what my understanding of our policy that we wanted was to protect and preclude the potential for dams on the Arroyo Seco, new dams on the Arroyo Seco. I'm concerned, I mean, even passed it by Andrew, I'm just concerned, why would the GSA get involved in any way with water rights? I know that's not, Tim has said it's not his intention, is to limit it or preclude it, but do we really want to? I'm just very concerned about even including that, with all due respect, Tim, and I haven't read all of this because I've just seen this flash on the board here,
Right.
but I'm concerned about having us, the GSA, take a position on, excluding any, I'm afraid that it will impact water rights, and I'm concerned. I don't think that the intent is there. The intent is to protect it. And so when it seems to me like it would be appropriate to, we would talk about our dam, not wanting any new dams, and the basis for it, as it looks like you've done, is to protect the environment. And then maybe it's something to the effect that you want the Arroyo Seco GSA to review or weigh in. I hate to even say this, but I'll say it, for any potential impacts from any new, have a right to, they can take a look and see if they want to weigh in or on any new diversions. We don't know what's out there and what people have rights to. This place is not adjudicated, and I don't think we want to go there, but that's
no, this is far from even the topic of adjudication. But early on, a couple of years ago, time flies, when I was floating the idea that we should try to ensure that the Arroyo Seco stays undammed. It wasn't I that brought up the idea that we should also try to make a statement that there should be no new appropriations that diminish the sustainability of the basin. And it wasn't me that came up with that, but it was, and I can't say who it was, I can't remember, but I was happy that was included, because it seemed to me that that even more closely tied into the sustainability of the basin. So we came up with a narrative I think it was a year ago, Curtis, I've still got it. And we talked about that idea of new appropriations. The only reason I brought riparian rights into it was I didn't want people reading into it that we were saying no new diversions, because that's not the case. You know, we're not going to do anything to your legitimate riparian rights, but it's when people come in for future appropriations that the policy says, hey, wait a minute, there should be no new appropriations that diminish the sustainability of the basin. And I think there's a very clear line between the watershed protection and the sustainability of the basin.
But
So that's
Tim,
that's sort
you
of the
know,
origin of how I got in there.
maintaining the sustainability is one thing, and that may impact it, but what if people want to propose some type of mitigation? I mean, to have an outright prohibition, I'm not sure that this Arroyo Seco GSA can do that.
Well, I would argue that anybody that comes in for an appropriation, this doesn't prohibit your appropriation, but it puts the burden on the applicant to demonstrate that you're not going to diminish the sustainability that you guys rely on right now. So if somebody comes in with an opportunity to appropriate 1,000 acre feet of water or whatever, this is saying, oh, wait a minute, you know, this watershed protection policy is intended to give sort of a review period about, is that 1,000 acre foot appropriation of Arroyo Seco going to negatively impact the sustainability of the basin? If it does, if it looks like it's going to negatively impact the sustainability of this basin, then that should be denied. If somebody comes in for a stock watering pond of 15 acre feet, well, you know, that's probably pretty easy to demonstrate that's not going to impact the sustainability of the basin. That's sort of the goal that I thought we were trying to achieve with that part of this watershed protection.
But I guess my question is, does the Arroyo Seco GSA have the authority to do that, to say no? And or is it appropriate for them to have that authority and say no?
I think that they have the authority to be a commenter on any application.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if it's the policy that we should be, that the agency should be commenting on whether or not it was appropriate because of impact to sustainability, I think that that's, again, that's the goal, I think, of the watershed protection policy. Maybe I'm clumsy on how I wrote it, but Nancy, read through the whole thing and catch me where I'm wrong.
I will. I appreciate that. Again, not having seen it, it just, you know me with the raising water rights, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, do we really want to go there? That wasn't the intent. It was to protect the sustainability of the basin and no new dam. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, as a
And
practical,
don't feel bad about hurting my feelings, because I wrote this, like I told Curtis, basically from the seat of my pants last night. And I'm really interested in the conversation, and we have our goals. Let's try to figure out how to achieve them.
exactly. The reason why I didn't send it out is I don't think it's really cooked enough for us to you know, kind of really bore down on the language. But as a practical matter, you know, both Tim and Nancy are making great points. If you think about it, if somebody did want to appropriate water out of the Arroyo Seco, we would be one of the first organizations that would say, hey, wait a minute. We would be wanting to make sure that the flow of water continued to recharge the Arroyo Seco Cone Management Area first and foremost. And, you know, that's our charge. So like it or not, we're going to get engaged in that. And I think Tim's point, at least I think the intent was to acknowledge that in a policy framework that says not only do we not want to see a dam on there, but folks know that every time somebody wants to dip their straw in the Arroyo Seco River, we're going to be standing up saying, wait a minute, how does that impact the groundwater basin?
But you know, are we getting to the point where we're saying at that point we are doing adjudications?
Well,
You know, you're gonna, that's like saying nobody new can come in and do anything.
no, Al, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And the river on the Arroyo Seco hasn't been fully appropriated. It's not really an adjudication when we're not talking about groundwater necessarily. What we're doing is talking about the surface water that recharges the groundwater.
So are we only talking surface water here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Michael here. I actually, I'm very happy that Tim took a stab at this, but I knew when I started reading down it that there was going to be, like Curtis had recommended, that perhaps Clark Colony looks at it and the city of Greenfield looks at it and everything. But you know, I think if you can do that kind of work in just a couple hours, Tim. What would happen if you had a few days to work on something like this?
I'd get bored and do something else probably. I don't know.
but no, I get, I get Nancy's point too. We've spent a lot of time trying to keep language that could be twisted from going and biting us. And so I see that this is going to require a couple meetings, I believe. But I bet you when we're done, we'll have something that can help protect our area and the environment.
yeah, Mr. Versick?
Tom Versick speaking. So, given the discussion, I have a little bit less to say than I thought I would. And I broadly am, it's hard to say it this way, but I'm agreeing with all the points raised in that I think it would be useful for someone, so possibly the Clark Colony attorney, and I'm certainly not volunteering, but just for the right people to take a look at this and transfer what are the intentions that you all have been talking about into some kind of language that parallels more the permitting process on the appropriations piece, which Mr. Weeks got into a little bit, some of that language, but just to get it a lot closer to that so that when the policy is finalized, it becomes a part of the update of the GSP down the road, so that it would be the GSP eventually that had the weight when appropriations and other things might be at issue. So I don't think I'm saying anything new. I'm just kind of paraphrasing what I think everybody has said to this point. Without taking any particular position on what's right or wrong about any of this, but I think it needs a lot more work, but it's work that could be really, really helpful to the goals people have expressed.
Yeah, Mr. Versick, those are really good points. One of the things that I've thought about, similar to your comment, was eventually where do we want this policy to land so that we can, I guess, obtain the most beneficial protection of the groundwater basin and of the natural system, the Arroyo Seco River. And GSP is certainly one place, but that's something I want to continue to sort out and work through. Where does it really get the most leverage, if you will, in the permitting process going forward? So that's something that I'll need to work on with Mary and with our new Clark Colony attorney, and bring back a little bit more refined version for the committee in the next month or two. And as Mr. Grieva had kind of alluded to, I suspect it's going to take us a couple, 3 goes at this before we really have something we feel comfortable with.
This is Jerry. With all due respect, I've got another thing I need to go to. Do we have other issues? Otherwise, I'm very supportive of what I've been hearing here, but I'd like to move on.
No, thank you, Jerry. I just have a couple of informational items, and this was really the most substantive piece that I wanted us to grapple with. And Tim, if it's okay with you, what I'll do now is I will forward this, and I'll note in my forwarding to the committee members that it's completely draft.
Mm-hmm.
It's not intended for any kind of process at this stage, and it's going to go and undergo revisions so that we're clear about that. But at least to give people, the framework to start from. So thank you for that.
Yeah, pleasure.
Is that okay with the committee? We're not really taking any action. other than for staff to continue to work on the item.
Yes, and I'd ask that with the next draft to have it circulated to the committee ahead of time would be helpful, which you usually do. So I usually do. So
Yeah.
thank you.
I wasn't comfortable sending this out to you guys, to be honest, because I had a feeling that we would have this kind of discussion, which is fine. But once we get a little bit more substantive in kind of the right kind of format and language, I will definitely get it out ahead of time for us all to take a look at, so we can throw even more darts at it. It's good. Yeah, not at Tim, at the document. And so if that's acceptable, I'm going to move on. Let's see, I think, yeah, we do have a GM report. I always try to maintain that so we'd have some informational things to talk about. Hey, yesterday I was part of the group that, I'm moving on to item 5 now, was at the water forum at the Board of Supervisors. I think it was beneficial in putting an awful lot of organizations in the same room talking about issues, but I don't know if it really resulted in us moving forward in terms of developing some regional solutions. You know, I think Chris Lopez commented at the end of the meeting, he was a little bit frustrated because quite candidly, I don't think we got real substantive around what the kind of next steps were and what we were really trying to do. And I'll frame it a little differently. I thought the biggest gap in that process thus far, because there hasn't been a really clear definition of what the problem is. There are multiple problems in our region relative to water supply. And just as an example, the issues that surround North County in and around Prunedale are way different than the issues that the peninsula faces. And they're way different than the issues that the Salinas Valley faces. And getting all of us together to talk about our various perspectives on our kind of individual myopic views doesn't really address what the problem is. And so I think if it's all right with the committee and Michael and you in particular, I plan to reach out to Chris and talk to him a bit about, you know, my concerns in that process. I'm not sure, you know, where the next, there's one more of these things planned. But without having a clear definition of what we're trying to solve, it's like, you know, taking a journey and taking our first step forward. If we don't know where we're going, we could wind up in the same place after walking 1,000 miles. And that's what I'm afraid we're going to do. I know, Nancy, you listened to the presentation. If you had any other thoughts or comments.
Thank you. I think Curtis did a really good job on behalf of the Oreseco GSA. So I do want to share that with everybody if you weren't part of it, and for outlining, framing what the goals are. You talked about the protection, the watershed protection policy. I mean, you did a really good job and appreciate it. And I think you're right though, Curtis, as far as it was, I'm sorry, but it was like I mean this respectfully to everybody, but it was a show and tell. So here's what we're doing, each agency, each entity. And but the substance is missing as Curtis said, as to what is the issue, what's the problem, how are we going to solve it? And we do need, while we need to work together, you know, all different parts of the county have different issues. The peninsula needs to solve theirs, Salinas Valley needs to look at theirs, not all, and not sure that the twains are ever going to meet. But so I agree absolutely with what Curtis said, but I did want to share, you did a really good job in your presentation, Curtis.
Well, thanks, Nancy. What I tried to do is use a narrative version to talk about the need to work together and then show a problem and how we resolved it. So, but I was really frustrated. Mr. Versick.
Thank you, Tom Versick speaking. I'm going to heartily agree with Mr. Weeks that Chris Lopez's comments are probably the best summary of the meeting. And if you don't want to listen to all 2.5 or 3 hours of it, he's somewhere 15, 20 minutes before the end, Mr. Lopez, Supervisor Lopez. And something that struck me, and when you listen, if someone goes to listen to it, you could think through what Mr. Lopez meant by boots on the ground. It's one of the phrases he used. And I've had some thoughts about that. It was an interesting phrase. Nobody else used it. He did. And I also agree that the problems in the county, the geographic lines of the county, it's a series of problems and they're not all related. And not to disagree with the counting Mr. Weeks has, but the way it seems to me at the moment is that there's the problems are the rural north, so that's Prunedale and those kind of areas, small water systems, northern/coastal, we know what that is, peninsula, we also know what that is, and then the rest would be kind of everybody else in the valley. It's just the way I've divided it from, conceptually. I don't have to be right, but I just heard problems and actually some successes too, but the issues are actually somewhat separate, and getting the peninsula a lot of water will do nothing for the small systems, up near Prunedale, for example. So anyway, I strongly agree with Mr. Weeks' overall impression of that forum. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Versick. I did try as diplomatically as possible to get to what I saw really as the root issue. And, I mentioned that it was great that we were getting all these grant dollars, but at the end of the day, those grant dollars aren't going to solve the stakeholder issue associated with the ongoing operation and maintenance and whatever is missing in terms of the capital costs. And having those really hard discussions, really, you have to have a problem and a solution so you can cost it all out to have the discussions, but we haven't even started with the problem definition yet. So I was frustrated. So I'll leave it at that. Second item is tomorrow we have a coordination committee meeting at, I think, 1 o'clock. Check my calendar here real quick. Yep, 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. Yep. We don't have a huge number of substantive items on the agenda. Most of them are communication and dealing with, frankly, the real lack of understanding where the Salinas Valley Basin GSA is headed with implementation to date. So we'll have a report out at our next meeting on how that went. But I always want to keep you guys, informed and knowledgeable about where we're heading with those. And we do have a board meeting next week. But I think that really kind of, there is one other thing. There is I think it's on the 3rd of October. There's a workshop that the Salinas Valley Basin GSA is going to hold. And I think that is their first run, if I'm not mistaken, at talking about demand management.
No, it's a deep aquifer.
Oh, it's a deep aquifer. Well, the demand management is coming up on, is it on their next board meeting then?
The demand management policy was at their last board meeting. And it is there is a staff report before for their executive committee tomorrow. And my understanding is that the last meeting, there was a lot of pushback as far as the outreach and the manner in which they were proposing to do this. And my understanding is that staff is reconsidering. I think we might hear it tomorrow at the executive committee and realizing they need to work through the sub-basin implementation committees rather than it's my words, one size fits all. And so we'll see. I guess we'll see. But no, that's already kind of a done deal as far as moving forward. And we're just hopefully that it will be moving with the sub-basin implementation committees and then through other stakeholders. And the third is for the deep aquifer.
Thank you, Nancy. I have to admit, I've been out of the country, so I'm still catching up a little bit. The one thing I will say about the demand management is my understanding is that they are looking to implement it sub-basin by sub-basin. And I think that's an important element relative to the fact that we're sustainable and don't really need to have demand management, and we don't even have really included in the Arise Cycle Cone management area as a management action.
The only thing I'd caution everyone, Curtis, with all due, they have said they want to implement, but they want one policy that can be, and that might be appropriate to have one policy that has certain standards and criteria that could be applied fairly across all of your sub-basins. But in that regard, we want to make sure that includes such as with the Rosseco, it's sustainable. Same with the upper valley, you know, so unless it meets certain criteria where it's upside down, then that action, and that's not part of the GSP management actions in any event, and you have a process that it has to go through. So those are the types of things, and at least my opinion, that should be, we want to make sure are included as they put this policy together for consideration.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's really, really important as we try to continue to push the bringing of these kind of items up through the implementation subcommittees, is that in that way they get vetted at an appropriate level. It's one of the items that we will talk about in tomorrow's coordination committee was, if you recall, that report that came out on the integration, how it just got sprung on the advisory committee was a little, it just, you know, was hatched and then delivered rather than brought up through a process. We want to continue to encourage the Salinas Valley Basin GSA to use those implementation subcommittees. I think that's all I have. Anything from any of the other committee members? Hearing none, meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Curtis.